All right, so guys, we're gonna, it's 1 o'clock, we're gonna call the meeting of the Organizational Focus, HTC's Organizational Focus Committee to order. Present are Bill Oliver, John McLaughlin, myself, John Hedden, and Kathy Flynn, our official staff. Thank you very much. That's 1 and 2. This meeting is being audio video recorded. Keep it down out there in the public, please, so Kathy can hear.
Need a conversation.
Yeah, if you got a conversation, take it outside, no clamoring. I'm just kind of acting as chair at this point until we do an official thing and figure out who's doing what. Adoption, can we get an adoption of the agenda as written?
So moved.
Okay, there being no approval minutes, there are no minutes, waived from the agenda. Public comment? No one from the public here today. Okay, so 7 is new business, and we're actually going to take it, I think, out. We're going to kind of mix the A and the B. This is just to give it some structure.
Okay.
So the idea here is, obviously, we want to cover what it is we're here to do. A big part of it is building with Nantucket in mind. The other part are organizational matters of concern to the HDC and general goals, which were discussed when this committee was set up. And then we'll just go from there. I'm going to try and give that some general structure to guide them the discussion of the meeting. I think I heard John McLaughlin bring up some concern about who's the chair or authorized person. Val, do you want to serve as in some capacity? John,
I
do you
don't
want
want
to
to be
serve?
the chair.
Do you want to be the chair?
No way.
You want to be the vice chair?
No way.
Val, will you be the chair?
No.
Will you be a vice chair?
I guess.
Okay, so
I make a motion, you're the chair, you're the vice chair. Just so you know.
so I'll vote on that for yes for Val, and you're voting yes for Val.
Both of you.
I can't vote on myself.
Yes, you can.
Well, I'm
How
not
does
gonna.
that work?
course
We
you
only
can.
have 3 people.
You can vote.
Yeah, I mean, a quorum is 2, so
Okay.
just 2 is fine. So you'd have to do each one separately.
So move. Let's get out.
Okay, aye.
Okay, so we're all that's
Yeah.
all duly voted, and I just want to say now as chair that this is going to be. I don't want this to be. This isn't a formal proceeding. Every time we do something, if we have an action that we want to bring forward to the commission, or we want to make a recommendation to someone, then we'll do an actual official motion and vote. But I don't think we need to be making motion and votes on everything. as we
No, I
go.
don't either.
There's 3 of us.
This is just discussion right now.
Yeah, totally.
You can just make discussions with no motions.
Yeah.
I will say, though, that
Yes, sir.
election of officers should be something on an agenda, so you should do that at the next one.
Yeah, I figured we'd get it out of the way informally for today, this meeting, and then when I announce next meeting, and we'll put on the agenda to ratify the vote
That
for
vote.
next.
Okay.
Yeah. And then that way we're proceeding during this meeting with some decorum that's somewhat official. Okay, so this is what I'm going to suggest. Where we left it was that establishing a work group to determine how to proceed with the building with Nantucket in mind, with the HD providing policy and other guidance throughout that process. So part of our determination in making a recommendation to the commission is going to be, how are we going to go about rewriting building with Nantucket in mind? And how is the HCC going to stay involved as a matter of policy and guidance to control the outcome consistent with the act, not consistent with what individual members may feel.
Right.
So that's, I think, our bigger picture role. And then the other part of it is what other policies and procedures relate to that, or are concern and rules and regulations and the application. And I just want to say, when I'm talking about policies and procedures and rules and regulations for this purpose of discussion, I'm really just using really broad terms. There are very specific things that we need to be looking at in terms of procedures, policies, process, some of which John has put forth in a written document. So those we'll write out with capital letters, but what I'm talking about now is just very general. This is kind of the scope of what we need to be doing. I was hoping that we could focus a little bit with building in Nantucket in mind. I have my own thoughts on maybe how to proceed. I brought some of this up initially during the process whereby the work of the committee was established. But I wanted to get some feedback from you guys on basically just explore thoughts on what's required, what are some of the shortcomings, what are some of the directions we may want to go, and how we might want to go about doing it without getting into rewriting any particular aspect of the building with Nantucket in mind here this morning or this afternoon. I just want to get an idea of your own thoughts so that I can start to establish a framework that I can bring back to the next meeting so that we have a little bit more structure to be talking within instead of just, going topic by topic. We can still go topic by topic, but let's have an idea of structure. Does that make sense?
It does. It's a little bit overwhelming.
I know, but this is going to be an overwhelming project without
know.
a framework. So anyways, I think thoughts on let's do it this way. Let's focus on what we think are some of the shortcomings currently.
Well, I definitely think that we need to include equipment, like our conduit policy we just came up with.
Mm-hmm.
I think that needs to be in here because there is nothing in the current building with Nantucket in mind about that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean just that, any exterior
Architectural,
antenna.
I got you. So exterior architectural features,
Yeah.
And then that will bring about a discussion separately with what does the federal government allow us to, we're going to have to get into, and this is stuff that I think I'm envisioning. I just want to be clear up front. A lot of this stuff is going to get farmed out. What we want to do is identify as our work group things that need to be included.
Mm-hmm.
And how we would like to see the process play out. And I mean, this is really, we're just taking an infinitesimal step right now. But I'm just saying that I think some of it will be antennas. There may be some antennas that we have control over, and there may be some we don't because there's federal law. So
Right.
that will get sussed out later in the
Right.
process by someone who's doing this
I'm
with
just
us.
trying to think of things that
Yeah.
come up. Also solar and alternative energy
Yeah, I think
items need a chapter or some kind of discussion.
be addressed. And you had mentioned before, we're really specific. This will give us a chance to get into some specifics, and then we can broaden out discussion, is what I'm hoping. You had mentioned before, I think at meetings, survey wet stamp, the FEMA.
Yes.
Right,
That
so
is
that's a big-
That's huge. And not that I don't trust everybody gives us the correct information, but it should be in some sort of official capacity.
So a surveyor verification.
Right.
And what are the policies that, again, these are just very specific things, but they're all gonna have different aspects of policies and guides and,
So I think for us right now, it's sort of a free-flowing thought process.
Yeah.
But we'll just throw things out and then,
yeah, and then that's actually what I'm hoping is just to get some ideas from you guys on areas of concern, and then we might get some, from the rest of the commissioners and from staff, get areas of concern. Because, again, these are just, we're just kind of chinking away at it right now to open it up a little bit. Well, I think when we open it up, there's going to be a lot of other stuff to do, and there's going to be a lot of smaller and bigger discussions to be had. But this is just a place to start.
another one, for instance, is complying or not complying, I don't know which, with zoning changes that are approved by other committees that didn't necessarily have discussion with us. I'll use an example, the 40 feet in the Mid-Island area.
Right.
Height.
Okay. So, I think the broader thing here is working with other town bodies,
Collaborative effort
the other,
somehow.
the public body in a collaborative, we're all pulling the rope in the same direction.
Well, so the reason I bring that up is because 30 has always been the standard, and that's not the case anymore. Perhaps we need to come up with our own policy on that and try to collaborate instead of, I think people are getting mixed signals. One hand says this is okay and the other hand doesn't.
Right, so I think maybe the broader topic would be, as you said, is collaboration between the public bodies, and we're looking at, you're using height as an example, but
Correct.
it could branch out into how is zoning used to develop an outcome versus a deed restriction, and in which instance would, I'm not saying we would do deed restrictions, just using examples. Where is it more benefit, or let me say it different, don't even get into deed restrictions, because somebody at home is pulling their hair out already, I'm sure, is the act. So we have the zoning bylaw and we have the act. And those are two legal, that's legal text. How do we have those work in concert with one another? How do they support each other better?
That's a nice way to say it.
And then that way we're, and then the final outcome is one that's stronger for everyone, but it's also good for the general public because they have an understanding of what the hell they're allowed to do. Because I get what you're saying. Somebody who, not everyone is an attorney, not everyone's an architect or a designer, not everyone's a surveyor, so they come to the meeting, they read the zoning bylaw, they read the guidelines. Who does that?
I do.
No, I know you do, but I mean, but they come in and they might think, oh, well, I could build a 40-foot tall building, and they come here and they're like, well, we're like, no. You say it a little bit differently than that. So I get what you're saying is that there's a disconnect. And I think that, John, you pipe in here. This is, whenever you want. This is, for me, I'm looking at, I would like to kind of put this into an umbrella of Nantucket. I'm going to just arbitrarily say a date, 2050. What is it that, the community wants Nantucket to look like, and in a way that's consistent with the act? The act
I
is...
think the cart already left the barn and the horse ran away.
Well, I don't know, because, I've heard Nat say this before at planning board meetings, is, we're creating new Nantucket history now, and everything changes, not everything changes, but you've got buildings that were built 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and I think in the more, if you will, the more expensive zip codes on Nantucket, or those 1, 2 zip codes, things change more rapidly. So if we as a community have a handle on, well, for instance, what multifamily guidelines are, what commercial guidelines are they different in different areas of the island? What is the guidebook really doing? We were in the newspaper for not preserving a house full of casement windows. The guidebook and the act are about preserving the whaling era, right, John? No? The historic aspects of Nantucket?
No, you asked me a question. I'll answer it because I'm going to have to.
Yep.
The main style of this book, right here, all right, second page in, that describes what, like outlying areas, existing contact, understanding Nantucket. Owners do not read this book. They get a copy of this, they used to get a copy, and they leave it on a coffee table to impress their visitors. All right, that's my opinion. And as far as what this explains here, we already know. New people coming on the commission are the ones that should have a guidebook. But in other words, I thought we were going to sit here and take now, I think the first thing we should do, my own opinion, start with guidelines for the old HDC and rules and regulations. There's a difference. You can take the guidelines out of here on page 88, part of it. All right? This was set up years ago for the old historic area.
Right.
All right. Then we should go down this item for item, say.
Yeah, we're not, you misunderstood role of this group. We were voted not to rewrite the guidebook.
That's right,
We weren't voted to do that.
that's right.
We were voted to talk about, identify the issues that need to be addressed in the new rewrite and come up with a recommendation on who and how to rewrite it. We're not, our job isn't to rewrite the guidebook,
That's right.
but that's
I
what
agree
you're
with all
saying
this.
to
You
do.
don't have to do anything with this. This is already there, you know? All this information is here.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean anything to anybody except an architect or a designer. That's all this means. The owner doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. Their architect, their designer or architect guides them through it. They should have something. But to take this and reprint this whole thing, which it doesn't mean diddly. As far as what we're saying, I thought, my opinion was we were going to take our Appendix A, which is the chapter, the law, it's right here. In here, it explains the structure, explains exterior buildings, different sections, public access, reviewing, designation of structure, definition of a structure. This act, regulation, we can make rules and regulations, and that's what we're lacking, is a rule and regulation. You know, the other thing is, you can't, all right, this one I wrote off, the interior, you can't go inside the structure. I agree 100%. The appendix can handle itself as it is. I think this is well written, this appendix. Tells you about doors, windows, fences, and then there's descriptions here. I think the descriptions don't have to be rewritten. I think it describes what they are. And I think, as Val hit on, the thing you gotta hit on is the new stuff. For the old historic district area, I think we should do strictly the old historic district area, and then we get something settled among the whole commission, what we wanna present to the town. And then, before we do that, the last thing we should go through is the front of this book. This has good descriptions, but a lot of it has been in the last 15 years that I've sat here. I've seen more things get, well, we make an exception, it don't look that bad, I like it, I don't like it. Town council told us years back, stop saying you don't like something. That puts you in a negative attitude, so you can't vote on the issue. You know, that's what I'm saying. These are the things I think we should take apart and you know, go over them. I agree with the law itself here, the appendix on page 155. That's the law itself. That's where we should go over the way it's written. Is there anything in there we think ought to be changed? Because this here is a pre to what we had before in the oldest historic book, which you have one, Steve, and I have one.
Mhm.
You know, and some of that has changed over the years.
Yeah, I mean,
In comparison.
Yeah, I look at the 1967 version, or 69, I think, 67.
Now this shows door latches, shows doors. It's just fine. It shows windows. Everything is here. This is what we should be working on. Do the old HDC area first. That way we get that out of the way. This you can and can't do. I think Val mentioned not roof antennas. There's a thing in here on what do you call it, cable TV,
Yeah,
round things, you know?
yeah,
Them, you know? Yeah.
dishes,
Yeah,
satellite dishes.
there's comment in here, that's good, we should have that, go over that. Do we wanna
Solar.
change something or leave it? You know, you take each item by item, put it down, and then go back over the whole thing again once you get it presented. That's the thing we should be working on. All right, rules and regulations in here, it says, this is a law. We voted this in 1993. Roof, dormers, skylights, scuttlers, chimneys, everything you need to answer is right here on this, that one page,
What page is it?
that page 181.
The 1995 edition.
Hmm?
It's in the 1995 edition.
Yeah.
It was voted in 1993.
Yeah, I don't have that page.
Right.
Appendix
Yeah,
G.
you read it.
I read the minutes from that meeting where you proposed that to the Board of Selectmen. 6 o'clock,
Good
I
man.
believe, downtown.
So what's my,
181.
I don't have that,
Approved April 27th, 1993.
John, can I see that copy?
Yeah.
The other copy you have?
This is the good book.
Well, I think,
That's mine.
I think one of the things first and foremost is that everyone should be, getting, John actually offered, and, we're gonna take him up on it, he's gonna print at the town print and bind a copy of this for each of us so we can write on it and make notes during our work. So that we're all looking at the same document, the same book as we're working.
Who's gonna make a print copy of it?
John is gonna print out this.
I was
I'll
gonna
make a
write on
binder,
this one.
binder for you, just
Okay.
a loose leaf binder that you
Right,
can
so
write.
just something so we can use it as a working document as we're going through. Yeah, so, okay, I think John's, thank you, appreciate those comments, I think
Yeah.
they're important. I think part of what our process is gonna be is wrestling with what we can and can't do as a small committee work group. And I think as long as we do what John's talking about in a way that is guiding our final recommendation versus trying to rewrite the guidebook, then we're safe. It's not that we can't rewrite the guidebook, it's just that three people shouldn't be sitting here in a public meeting or not rewriting the guidebook. It needs to be done by a larger body. So I agree with you, John. I'll support, well, that's what our recommendation is gonna be, is how are we actually gonna get it rewritten? Who's involved? Is it just the HDC Commission providing policy and guidance? Or are we working with a facilitator who who maybe has worked with historical commissions, who maybe has preservation background, who is helping to guide our policy and decisions, but also serving as a facilitator to get feedback from other people in the community, like Ray was saying, our chairman was saying, getting architects and designers, other members of the public. So that, because this isn't, look, it's taken, when was this written, 96 last time?
95.
Okay, so do the math. I mean, we're doing this is like the book for the next 30 years. So we can and this is my own thought, so you guys can tell me what you think too. We can either go through this and come up with recommendations on who should do what to rewrite the guidebook. And it could either be, we just go through this and we kind of tinker with it, or it could be that we separate out into sections, maybe the narrative part, and then there's the user manual part, so people actually use it, and it's more specific, and it has the rules and regulations, and it updates the act that John's talking about, and it ties down as the priority of the old historic district.
I'm in favor of that.
But that's a job that we can figure out who's gonna do it and how, but it's not a job that we're gonna do ourselves sitting here. There's no way we're gonna get that done in the period of time we would need to do it, and we don't have enough input from people. Like, I don't feel comfortable trying to go out and sell to the community that the three of us, with our professional staff, sat here and rewrote this. However we rewrote it, unless we just kind of go through and we draw out, we move some things around. If we're gonna do something that's gonna be a lasting document, I think it needs to be something where we have a professional resource who would perhaps be the same party that would later rewrite the book, but maybe not. And that's why I said this is, I think, a 3-month process. This isn't like, because we could just come in here and pretty quickly say, well, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. We need this, 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 and this. These are our ideas, and here, HDC, these are what we think should be, and whether they vote it up or down, and then it goes to a printer or a writer to figure out how to write it. I'm not sure, my vote is that we need to do more than that. Because this isn't, we have people who come in and they don't read this, because it's got a lot of really
It's too lengthy.
great information, but it's not a user manual for building on Nantucket. I don't think it should be thrown away. I think it should be part of what we do, right? Like, it should be part of the final product, but it should be like the narrative history or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
You already got it.
You're looking, I can see it. in
No,
your eyes.
I'm just a little bit overwhelmed because everything is so complicated. When you're on a work group or you're on a commission with the town, you have to watch everything you say, how you say it.
Yeah.
So I am so, like, tongue-tied, I don't know what to say.
Well, what do you think, okay, so I guess what do you think of the bigger picture concept of we're doing a rewrite, we're providing a recommendation on what should be included in a rewrite of the guidebook, and in addition, we're providing a recommendation on what that process should look like, who should be involved, and what the general timeline is. So they're really two separate things, but they're just, they're clearly related. Or do you guys think we should just be going through this? And I don't think that's our mandate, is to be going through this line by line and saying, keep it, take it out. I think it's more,
Well, I'll say this, the more people involved, the more complicated it gets.
yeah,
If you want, and I don't disagree with you that there should be other opinions, what do we do? Do we send out an email to everyone in our industry, a blast email, and say, does anybody have any specifics or input they'd like to see discussed, identified, anything, whatever it is?
Well, I think,
Do you put it in the paper?
well, it would need to be adopted by the commission, probably a legal ad in the newspaper for at least 2 weeks. I feel this is the HDC's book, and you're HDC members, so as far as I'm concerned, you write the book, because you're the HDC, so this is what you're gonna publish. This is a public meeting, so people could show up and chime in
Right.
and have comments. It would be a courtesy, I think, to maybe inform some people that this type of thing is going on. But technically, it's a posted meeting down with the town clerk. So
Right.
Yeah, but I get
It's
what he's
public.
saying, that people don't always see the posted.
right, I completely understand. But I do feel that this, as I said, this is your book. You could be writing this stuff and presenting it to the HDC, the commission, and starting from there and say, hey, what do you think?
Yeah.
I think having a focused work group such as this, like right now, as Val said, and I think you said also, is you guys can really focus in a lot of stuff and probably get a lot done.
Yeah.
As far as guidelines and everything, and not to diminish the work group, but at this stage, it's just a work group. So basically, you are just really brainstorming and could come up with all the ideas to present to the commission. The commission could hold an open meeting, simply, fully on discussion of building a Nantucket line. A special meeting on its own, or a number of meetings, or
Yeah.
advertising the paper. But that's my feeling. I mean, my feeling is this is your PhD.
Yeah, and so can I?
Yeah.
So I think, thank you, John, because I think that's important to get that feedback. I just want to be clear, when I say, open it up to the public body and architects and designers and so on and so forth, I agree with your comments, and I agree with yours. You can't, on one hand, the more people are involved, the longer everything takes. On the other, it is the HTC's book, and it is their, as elected officials, they've got a duty, and part of that duty is, it's outlined within the Act, which includes revisiting the Act, revisiting the guidebook, creating rules and regulations. It's not like the HTC needs to go out to the general public to get a ton of feedback on that. And I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that, okay, maybe it's easier to go with examples. We go through this and we realize that there are some areas in here that would benefit from public input. So we have like an open meeting for that particular area. And it may be different things for different people. It may be the general public or whoever attends of the general public who are interested in the preservation aspect and demolitions and so on and so forth. And we get feedback from that. We make our own decisions, but we have they come to a meeting, we discuss what our current policy is and what we think it might change to better reflect current circumstances and how to address things. We would have a meeting about that open, they're all open to the public, but the commission would have a meeting, it might be one of our recommendations, to address particular topics with particular groups as the point persons from within the community. Everyone can come, but it may be that the other aspect of it is some aspect of how we do the applications and how long it takes and what's on the application and what's not. And we might come up with a recommendation on what should be included and what shouldn't, and it gets voted by the commission. But then the commission opens it up to the architects and the designers for feedback. We're not telling them that we're going to change the form because they're giving us feedback. We're just simply being receptive so that we're not missing something, because if this is a vision for the next 20 or 30 years, what I'm suggesting is we want to make sure we get the input that we don't miss something. You know, that's kind of what I'm saying. Does that jive with what, or no?
I'll just say this, I was on the work group before.
Right.
And spent months and months rewriting the applications myself on my own time to present, and it never went anywhere. It's a frustration because sometimes, I don't know,
That's not going to happen with us, Val. I'm not that type of personality.
I know. I just
Not
want
that
to
you're-
say
you know
that
what I mean?
because I don't have a whole lot of free time.
Yeah, I mean, this
right
is
now,
coming out of my
so
paycheck,
I want
too.
it to be time well spent, and
maybe we bring that up with the group. You know, maybe
Yeah.
this is the first thing we bring up with the group when we do a revisit with them on what we discussed is, you know, we came up with different ways to approach it. I think we're going to have a general agreement. I'm getting a tone on that, but the underlying issue is putting a lot of time in this and having it either go nowhere or have it kind of fizzle or be wholly farmed out and not have the HCC have control over it in terms of policy and guidance.
oh yeah, I agree with that.
So those are things that, and I'm not saying I'm just saying those are concerns that John has brought up.
Yeah.
He brought up the concern about putting time into this and having it be kind of for naught. John, Mr. Haddon put together a form for us, and it's been kind of idle. And
Why?
well, because we don't get to it at the end of the meeting, so maybe we need to have more organizational meetings. I don't know, maybe, that's what I'm saying, is we may have recommendations that aren't just about building with Nantucket in mind, which is why I kind of
No,
shoehorned
it's
that in.
the broader process.
Right, because, and part of that process might be how we're dealing with this. You know, we might say, look, these are our concerns as a work group.
Yeah,
We're gonna put in these hours, we agree to volunteer, but we wanna make sure it's for a reason.
right.
We want to have your support to come hell or high water. We're going to vote on something, and it's going to be, you know, not to just shelve this for another couple of years.
Right.
It's going to be to work on updating it and making it more user-friendly and making it, does that,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, I just want to make sure I'm catching it, you know, because communication is 90% of the battle.
So, another thing for me that's always been sort of nebulous, and I'm thinking of these things as they come to me, there's
Please.
no particular order, is that there's all these established little civic groups.
Yeah.
There's the Squam Association and the Surfside Association and the Brant Point Association, and we could go on ad nauseum. And they spend time and they come up with recommendations, but we are not bound to follow those. So there's a disconnect somewhere.
Well, I would say.
So do we waste any more of their time, or do we try to, like you said, work in a collaborative manner?
Okay. Can I
Yeah,
interject big
Yeah.
family type style
Yeah, yeah.
discussion here?
yeah,
So, okay, so this is where, and this isn't my, original idea, I'm just taking the information that I've gathered from being involved in different parts of the community over the years, and this is where would be an example of where we would make a recommendation that part of the guidebook would include area plans.
Yeah.
And then the group would say, not just Old Historic District, but also, and not just rural, but more Quidnet, Pocomo, Shimo, different areas, Cisco. And each of those groups may come in, it may be part of the process, that the work group facilitator who's got the historical background in preservation and understanding of the architecture and is like getting paid to sit here and look through this with a microscope and look around the island and make recommendations to us, comes up with an area plan. And then we review it and we think we put, as elected and appointed officials, we give our input and we distill it down into an actual plan that we would then share with with the public. But it might be the Mannequin area plan. Maybe we would start with Mannequin because it's so important and it's not its own historic district like Wisconsin. So that would be where a group would come in.
Right.
And then that would help us kind of figure out, because again, we don't want to be where you were saying, where you got too many people involved and nothing gets done. But we still want to reflect the fact and honor their work as citizens involved in their own area.
Right, so a thought that I had was perhaps instead of putting all of this in one group, Sconset had their own at one point. Guideline, got a book. Maybe it's broken up into sections so that if you're building in Sconset, you don't get the whole.
Right.
There's a standard book of steadfast regulations and how the process works, and then I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. Is that a way to go?
I get it, and I think
Is there a hardscape?
I think that would be a good
hardscape.
A hardscape.
And also not just hardscape, but okay. So then the discussion is hardscape. How does it fit into it? I'm also trying to figure out how we work as a group as we're doing this. So I'm trying to. It's like learning to, communicate all over again. The dynamic changes when you go from 8 to 3. Not to discount your presence, but I'm just saying is in terms of. So yeah, I think okay. So my response to that would be along the lines of, okay, how does hardscape relate? Hardscape is something obviously it's covered. How do we address it? Do we address it as there's general rules, and then there are area rules, and then how does that actually translate into a document? Is it I would think that every area, as the areas are developed, so we could prioritize Old Historic District and Nantucket. Boom, those are like the first two things to do, and it's a learning process. So the process we undergo in establishing whatever is going to go into those, much of which is already in here for the Old Historic District, is it can be refined as we go and we do more areas, or if we go to multifamily, or if we go to commercial. But in terms of hardscape would be Old Historic District. These are the rules.
A category in
Right.
each
Yeah.
a subsection.
And then maybe general rules that each,
Yeah.
So that's, I would think,
Yeah.
something we can do there. Then maybe there would be, again, we're talking about commercial. Or let's talk about, community housing, workforce housing. That's a good, relevant, topical example. We have Tacoma that came in. There's concerns.
Yeah, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Just before you move on from that, I think the areas are great, and I think what Nantucket is great and separates from all the other ones is they zoned this to 25 feet. The residents of Nantucket actually changed the zoning in that area, and that's a law.
Yeah.
So, these other ones are great guidelines and recommendations, but zoning change, there's no pools in town, in the old historic district, or technically the ROH for zoning. So that distinction right there saves a lot of time.
Well, and I think incorporating that into the book
right
is also going to make it clear.
Right, and obviously
I
it's
was a
hard with
person
the
who got
oil
caught
and
in
water
that.
mix of HDC and zoning and planning board and all those other separate, and in my personal opinion, most of the time you do want to keep them separate. You don't want to be interfering with each other, but there are times when working together would be, helpful, such as with the conduit units where it says, okay, yeah, we're the HDC, we approved your AC unit on the side of this house. You have to check with zoning to make sure it's not in your setback.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it definitely, there is a lot of confusion with, people say, oh, well, the HDC gave me an approval to do this, and
Yeah.
now I'm going to zoning, and they're saying they can't do this. I don't
Well, that came
understand,
up
but,
at our,
Right, and I actually ran into, interestingly enough, I ran
Presentation.
into Mark
Right.
today, Mark Poor from ZBA. And he explained, just a quick aside, he explained something to me, because I said, well, gee, maybe we should have something on our application for staff to check if we find out there's a conservation, or a zoning, ZBA, interaction or approval required, so that we would know at some point. And he explained to me how it works, because I haven't really done much in front of the ZBA, and that is that they actually prefer that people come in here and they get an approval from the HTC first, because then they know what generally the HTC has approved. It can go to the ZBA. If it's to allow a variance to come over into a setback or something, the ZBA then knows what it is it's approving, because it references as an approved exhibit the certificate of appropriateness. From that point, it gets tracked through the system with zoning enforcement, because zoning enforcement sees it on the has a ZBA approval, it sees it references a specific exhibit. They can't necessarily come in here and get a revision for a 2-story building addition instead of that 1-story porch within the 5-foot setback. They can come in, we don't even need to know about the fact that it's got a zoning variance, because when it goes to the zoning enforcement officer, he's gonna say, well, that's great, but this is what the ZBA approved. You may have gotten it approved by the HCC, but you gotta go back to ZBA. And ZBA may then say, we don't approve of it. So I think that area, I agree with John along the lines of that, like, we don't need to be involved with the planning board's determinations on zoning or the ZBA's process and their determinations. I think it's with respect to planning the big picture that we need to be on the same page. There's a very valid reason in zoning and in zoning planning for the 40-foot, the height of 40 feet. How that gets implemented may have been a little bit different if there was HTC involvement with some sensitivity to perhaps, yes, you can have 40 feet, but only 20% of the overall ground cover can be that height. Something along those lines. And that's what I think, just to be clear, is that's what I'm talking about, is when we work together, is we're working together on those types of things. We shouldn't be involved in other commissions' business, and they shouldn't be involved in the HTCs.
Right, and I think that's important. It's ultimately, it's not your responsibility to research what zoning is, and based on what you're going to approve. It's really a courtesy. It's the same as, Val or yourself or John looks at a floor plan and says, oh, I noticed this is a mudroom. Yeah, you could put a window in there. It's going to be no harm, no foul, and this is what we're looking for in the exterior of the building. It's,
Well,
when you might say, oh, geez, this looks like it's in such and such a zone with only a 5-foot setback. And it looks like your deck is only about 4 feet from the setback. You might want to check, but it's not your responsibility.
No.
And for all this to work, I think it would be all town entities having to get together and compile some sort of book together.
Which would be a lot of work.
I think
yeah, I get that, but it's with specifics to height. I think it's very irresponsible to not consider our point of view on that, because our mission is what things look like. And if there is nothing that looks like 40 feet, that's
Right.
10 feet, that's a whole extra floor and a half
right, yeah.
above what's typically been approved up till now is not really a great idea. It causes a lot of, I see, issues.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the it causes issues thing. And I think, I think it's an unintentional thing. I think planning, when it comes to zoning and stuff like that, figures the HTC is going to be diligent in how it addresses height issues. So they didn't necessarily say, well, we have to put some type of a parameter
But what
on
is
it.
what was the thought process behind that?
I don't know, I can't speak for everyone. I guess what I'm trying to get at is the crux of the issue is that if we don't work together to some extent on the bigger picture plan, and this is why I use areas as an example, because it's easier to break it down versus saying the whole island. but or a specific type of housing. If we don't work together on those with some open communication, the end result is it's confusing for the public or the attorneys or the designers, or it's not confusing and they just use that lack of discussion to kind of triangulate like you would do with mom and dad. And you come in and you see what you can get. Well, they said 40 feet, you guys should approve it. Some people will dig in their heels and say no. Other people say, well, I'm looking at this part of our process as an opportunity to kind of deal with some of those things a little bit. We're not going to fix it, but if we can talk, if we open up dialogue, I don't think there's any resistance on anyone's part. I sit on the planning board, and I've never had anyone be like, we don't want to talk to the HDC about this.
Well, I don't think that either.
No, I'm not suggesting you do. I'm just saying for the folks at home that it's just a matter of, look, the DPW or the sewer and water weren't always communicating. They haven't always communicated. They were doing, one company, one part of the town was digging new water lines and the other was putting in new sewer. And the next year they might flip because they are their own priorities. And now they're communicating more about the same timeline. That they're not doing each other's work. They still got their own laws and mandates and stuff, but they're coordinating a little bit more. And I think the end result is the public benefits. The public is less inconvenienced. They understand what's going on. Their money is better spent, so on and so forth. So that's all I'm saying is one aspect of redoing this. John?
Number one, planning board has too much influence on their decision at their meetings, what's good or not good for Nantucket, and it overflows back to us. All right, that's one thing. They got involved and screwed up this commission in the last couple of years because they got involvement, made all these changes of personnel and this stuff. They couldn't leave it alone.
Well,
And they still don't. They still interfere with us. That's my opinion there. If they want to discuss it with me, I'll be glad to sit and talk with them.
okay.
So that's on there. But anyway,
I appreciate your concern. I think, everyone has a kind of a different opinion on how things happened and the votes that were taken by the town meeting and all the rest of it. I think we have to work with what we got. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I respect your opinion, but we got to work with what we got.
all right,
And we
well, I
got
know we do.
staff from the town provides, through plus, and, John, Kathy are pretty much exclusively dedicated to us. So we're working with them and they're doing a good job and
All right, in the long run, let me say this. You got your books, go to page 89, please. This is one of my things that always bugged the hell out of me for the last 20 years.
we're gonna get some specifics.
You're looking at a map of Nantucket. Okay.
Oh, I don't have the
There are only two areas on this island. All right, you look at where it says Nantucket, and it says Wisconsin. That's your old historic district area. Everything else is moot compared to this island.
In this guidebook.
There's no professionalism in here, in messing around with things. Because now go to page 139.
Wait, can you clarify your statement? I don't understand what you mean. There's no professionalism?
No. Basically, if you want to do it, let me say this, there should be two guidebooks, all right? I'm not saying there should be, it would help if you had rules and regulations, hard and fast. Never mind this like what happened,
Right, for
what
those
happened Tuesday night, you
Wisconsin.
know what happened Tuesday night.
What happened Tuesday night?
The roof walk the guy wanted, the whole length of that, almost the whole length of that damn building, all right? It's too long for that building, I said so, and it always has been. Very few of them go from end to end. The only one is the one in the red building on the middle of Main Street, out past, Ray's Court, the corner. It's a red building with white trim.
Oh,
That's the only one that when I was a kid, that had it from one end to the other. And,
Okay.
and a couple of brick buildings, okay?
okay, that's a good example, but while you're on the example, my concern, as I sit here and watch, is that sometimes a roof walk gets approved somewhere that doesn't meet the guidelines, and then we're not consistent from applicant to applicant. And that's where I think we need to address it.
I was just gonna say that. I try to be very consistent, and I am of opinion about it at times, but I stick to what I believe the guidelines are.
Pretty much.
Yes, all right. Now, if we worked on different sections, first section we work on is the old HD. You get a map of it, all right? Now, all right, do we want to make any changes in the area of the old HDC? We should pick up Nantucket, you're right, Steve, we should pick up Nantucket and do it, make our rule and regulation, some night sitting right here. This is gonna be the old HDC area in Nantucket, and that's it. So what else you gotta cover? You don't make them for quitting it and all in it.
Well-
They're hamlets, you know?
Well, but no, I disagree with you. I'm gonna give you some pushback. I'm gonna give some pushback on that. I'm not suggesting when I say different areas, each area has Quidnet. I said it, but I didn't mean it that way. Quidnet, Shimo, Bacamo have their own guidelines. But there should be areas that, this is outdated. This wasn't followed for the rural areas. It doesn't make sense anymore to follow the same guidelines that don't make sense. You keep doing the same thing over and over again that doesn't make sense. You're either stupid or crazy. We know that those guidelines have not been necessarily followed. What I was suggesting is part of not Old Historic, not the Sconset, not the Mannequin, is we look at the different areas of the island and we break them up into areas. And they may have different rules, like there's areas of the island that still have a character that hasn't changed. Here, let me give you an example of an area that has changed. Cisco. Cisco is completely different than it ever was in history. But it might benefit to identify all the areas like Cisco or that would tend to go that way and establish some guidelines for those areas. They'd be called whatever they're called, whether it's by geographic area or by the style of architecture or by the style of use or whatever it is. It would be, I believe, beneficial for us, not as a priority. I think Nantucket, Old Historic District, Wisconsin District, and Mannequin, in that order, are the priority. But these other areas need some attention because they're not getting the attention.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of houses that are over 25 feet tall in these areas that if the HCC over the last 3 decades had followed the guidelines, wouldn't be there. But they are there. So let's figure out, my feeling is let's figure out as an HCC and also as a community, that's why we want group feedback, what does the island look like in 2050? If it keeps going like it is now, and we don't have consistency because we don't have guidelines for those areas, who knows what the hell it's gonna look like? Do you know what I mean? So that's when I say areas, that's what I mean. I'm not saying every hamlet has its own
I
code
understand
book.
it, right.
But it might, Quidnet is completely different in some ways than Cisco.
Okay. All right, go to page 142.
I'm sorry, what's page?
142. This is a basic guideline, it was perfect, and it was never, until about 15 to 20 years ago, these trophy houses started to move in, as I call them, all right? All the new construction, it doesn't look like the old historic districts area, which is just fine. Nobody goes out there. But look at what you see here, the top of the page, it says, and the page behind it, you know? Try to build below the top, page 141, bottom right page. That building, it should have been done years ago, and it stopped because money moved in, and you know these people got money, they want that house. If not, they'd appeal it, and the selectmen years ago got upset. Look, we're having too many lawsuits, you know, because you say you can't have something, you know. It's not you can't have something. Our opinions of let me put this right. Somebody comes in and wants something. Right? Well, there's not that many. You're setting precedents, all right? We set a precedent last night on, what the hell one was it? I can't think of it. Anyway, I'm not going to. But as far as I'm concerned, that right now is too late for these pages right here. These 2 pages to be looked at, 141
I don't think it is.
142.
I want to push back. I don't think it is. I think I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV, but we have at the town. This is why. Okay, just follow me on this because it's important. I think it's important. I don't know if it's really important. If the community through the HCC, the elected and appointed officials determine that there are that under the Act, Nantucket is a historic district, that these things aren't being followed, and we need to establish a process so that they are being followed, so that we don't wreck, the island isn't done. so that it does preserve the historic fabric that was originally intended by the act. This can be built up, this can be refined, and it can be made legally defensible. Part of that process is the public outreach with respect to areas. You get the support from the community is who elect the selectmen, the community is who elect the planning board, the community is who elect the HDC, the community is involved in all these aspects of it. We're a small community. The point isn't to raise hell about who gets elected. The point is to point out that if the community supports enforcing these and tightening them up, then whoever is elected, it's going to be incumbent on them to not say, oh, we got too many lawsuits. It's going to be incumbent upon them to help us do our job. But right now, we're not doing it as well, I think, and I'm going to say we, I mean, for the last 30 years. So that's why I'm pushing back on. I don't think we should throw these away. I think we need to fix them. I think we need to make them defensible, and we need to be consistent. If you look at this, John, look at page 142, figure 147. So geometric clearings and houses centered in clearings, and then the next one is clearings with natural shapes, emphasizing landform, and then and across the page, figure 148, inappropriate placement of a house on a hilltop. This explains Eel Point Road now. You got more of these things that aren't necessarily clearings with natural shapes. That's not so much, it's not so bad out there. But you have all these houses on a hill. So just to close that out, is if we have area plans, those can be made to be legally defensible. They can be made to have first determine community support, then make them legally defensible, and then they can be enforced. So I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think we need to acknowledge stuff hasn't been followed, but it doesn't mean that it can be that way forevermore. That's my personal feeling.
Okay, I understand that.
Okay.
But I say, it's, I'm going to say, time-wise, okay?
Yeah, please.
We're going to lose a lot of time, whether it's guidebook or not. We're going to lose 5 years in the next 5 years because we're still continuing to go on with personal taste. And you see it coming, all right? Personal taste settled Tuesday night, all right?
Which is
That
why.
roof, and I mentioned it should not have gone because I'm only one person and I stand by my consistency. I tried it. I said the roof walk is too long for that and there aren't that many around here that go from one end to the other. But the majority of the members said, oh no, it don't look bad. Make a change here or there, but make it look good.
And I was one of them. And you know what? I'm going on what I've been seeing happening here. There's a lack of consistency in our determinations. We're making our determinations based on architectural merits of individual buildings, a lot of times with the historic fabric in mind. A lot of times it has no historic fabric because it's outside the historic district, and we're using what's there around it. We have to make a determination if that's what we want to keep doing as a recommendation to the commission. Or do we want to have things put in place to protect these areas and have a certain outcome? We're not determining the outcome. We're using this as a guideline. There's a lot of good information in here. We get the feedback from the commission. We get the feedback from a historic preservationist and a person who handles this type of stuff, who understands some of those issues that we might not, and then we follow it.
Bless you.
Thank you. Anyway, okay, fine.
Well, no, I want to know if you agree or not, because I don't want to keep talking about something if you don't agree or you don't agree. That's part of what this process is.
Right.
Is like, do you agree that okay, let's get some agreement. We agree that the old historic district needs to be tightened up. Part of that is guideline use, part of that is rules and regulations. So for instance, it would be a rule about the roof shingles. Not a policy, it's a rule. I'm just giving an example. So OHD, when I say tighten up, that's what I'm talking about, stuff like that. Wisconsin Historic District, same type of thing. Nantucket. Nantucket needs a little more development because it's not really its own district, but it's an area of like concern for rules and guidelines. Is that something we all agree on?
Yes.
John?
Yes, I agree.
And what does our professional staff think? Those three areas is an area of focus.
Yeah, definitely the OHD in Wisconsin. There are older houses in Monaca and Whitman.
Yeah.
Definitely, there's some older structures out there. In Nantucket, there's some older houses out there, but
Not much.
it's has its own identity, that's for sure, on the island. As far as defining an identity, I think is a tricky thing, but working with, the Nantucket Advisory Board and see what's appropriate in Nantucket and what's not. I mean, I think a big help in that right out of the gates is the 25-foot,
Right.
Well, they've also made some restrictions with regard to pools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those
I
help.
think their citizens have been
Right.
very active, involved with zoning, and seeing that that's where those changes.
And I think, if I may, I think, who am I? But that's due to failure of previous HDCs. Citizens have gone to where they can get redress. They've gone to town meeting to establish zoning bylaws to prevent things from being approved through the HDC. Pools, pool setbacks, height restrictions in Mannequin. Just an observation of why I think Mannequin is one that is, I understand the historic aspect isn't as strong as, say, Quidnet, but they've organized, they've become vocal, and I think that can be helpful in the process that we're about to undertake. So sometimes our priorities may not necessarily be because it's if there's fewer houses being built in Quidnet than in Nantucket, we're kind of trying to address the priority and also where the people are vocal and they can help support the change.
Right.
So John, Val, John, what do we think about the outlying areas? We think that those areas need to have their guidelines reviewed, and some of those areas need to be brought into, should they be types? Is it like Quidnet and Walwinet are a certain type? Is it, or maybe this is just something for further discussion, is how to break those areas down, not necessarily geographically.
Well, I think like this section that John was referring to, that didn't get followed through. The 22-foot height, that's gone. So that, whatever. I think the HDC actually created the typology or new architectural style by putting in some things like those height restrictions because people worked within the height and then the buildings pretty much became
What would fit?
neat,
Height.
just the height, but not
And the ground cover.
the style, so to speak.
Right.
So a whole new style evolved, and
Right.
now that's a pretty common style.
Yeah,
Upside down houses primarily,
yeah.
with, there's always like a big mass and then some wings to sort of ground it, and porches all around it.
So do you think that guidelines for those areas are, maybe it would be helpful in that regard to kind of look at those areas more closely versus what, I love to, when I was active landscaper years ago, we would have clients call and they would ask about their roses. And everyone looks at a postcard in Nantucket with the roses. And that's what's in their mind's eye, and that's what it should look like all year long. That's it. So with that in mind, I'm just wondering, I think we each have our own idea of what Quidnet looks like. Like I know, last night, I'm not gonna get into discussion about the application, but there was a application out on one of the lanes. It was for a big house with multiple structures. And it was clear to me that different commission members have in their mind's eye what this area looks like. So they were each making, giving their inputs and contributions based upon what their feeling about the area was. And that feeling may have been inaccurate in some regards, and maybe all of ours. So I guess that's the long way of saying is, I wonder that in helping to break down these other areas, that might actually be our recommendation. Maybe we have some general guidelines to help arrest things a little bit, and some general rules to help arrest things, but we would then ask for funding or create funding, because we can allocate funding for, not we, but, the commission, for some type of a study, and I'm not talking like, let's send it to committee study, but some type of an inventory of what constitutes this area and what is the typical type of architecture and what do we want it to, as a basis of what we want it to be. This is just one idea, brainstorming.
Mm-hmm.
But that might help us to get a handle on it. Maybe that we don't need to do that. Maybe we don't need a study. It may just be that it's more of what does the commission, and then with input from the community, whether it's a specific area or not, want this area to look like consistent with the original act. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's a good idea? You think it's a bad idea? You think it's not worth spending time on?
No, I don't think it's a bad idea.
Should discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's put that as a discussion point, is how to provide guidelines, how to provide guidance and rules. So that'll be something we discuss for the next meeting.
I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Yep, please, go ahead.
All right, now, what really hurts people coming on this commission, okay? If you're not an architect or a designer is different from having a license, whatever, I don't know. But anyway, what hurt this commission worse was to change it from 5 years to 3 years, right? Anybody coming off that sidewalk comes in here, doesn't know too much about what's going on with this HDC and how it should be strict in certain areas and not, right? But anyway, they get on the commission. It takes them at least 2 years to listen to everybody and pass on information of what guidelines should be used. Right? We only have 2 pages here that are rules and regulations. Now, the town council told us, this many years ago, he said, I said it last night, do not say you do not like something. And he also said, start making rules and regulations before 1995, whatever it was. Anyway, so we made them for the old historic area. And if those members that came on a 3-year term, by the 3rd year, they might catch on to a lot of it, or maybe 80% of it, but you're still sticking personal taste in there. All you got to do is open this up, say, you want a skylight. Okay, here it is. Shall be made of wood only, shall not exceed 2 by 3, etc. Right? Each one of these written out this way, you tell them, hey, look, read there. What's it say? It's got to be 2 by 3. You can't get a bigger one. All right? And go to chimneys made of brick or a brick with cement targing. That's all you can have, one or the other. Well, I want cobblestones. Boy, there's a few of them around. Got approved. They should have said no. All right? The cobblestone ones are made out west. That's where they had them, in farms. Right? I'm just saying, this is the way I feel. That you get to have something in black and white and just say, here it is. Now, what part of no do you not understand? Right? It says here you can have this in this area. Right? And they look at you. Well, there's one over here and there's one over there in Mannequin, there's one in Wisconsin, 12 miles away. Just because they got one, that don't mean you can have them. Here it is. Now, that's what we're going to put it in black and white and stick to it. Say, we're sorry, that's it. You can appeal it to the Board of Selectmen, take it to court, take it to court. It's all in less time than we'll be building the house on Nantucket. That's one side of it. But, I just feel that we've got to clamp down and solve it in the old areas, and that's all. There's only 2 areas you got to go, Wisconsin and there, unless we add Nantucket beforehand, and there it is. There's nothing more simple than that, because you get somebody sitting there, well, my client wants it. Well, I tell you what, you tell your client, take this act to Boston, and let them vote a change on it, because the legislature, it gives us our power to do things.
Okay.
So, I'm just saying, that's the thing. They change it back to 5 years, that's the first stop. People will stay longer, but so many people, every 3 years you change somebody. So
I think it's too, because maybe people don't want to make a commitment that long.
Yeah.
You don't have to. You can quit anytime you want.
Yeah.
But, if somebody quits and you got to appoint somebody,
Yeah.
good. the appointing authority, right? It could be the selectmen and us. We used to meet with the selectmen, and between 10 of us, we'd pick who we thought could be most useful and helpful for the guidelines, and the rules and regulations. So I'm saying, yeah, you're right in the way.
You didn't post that meeting, did you?
Huh?
You didn't post the meeting.
What meeting?
That was an open meeting violation.
They did that at the Atlantic Cafe.
I'm kidding.
Oh, I was strapped for that one, that open meeting law. They sued us. The attorney there, what was she sitting here last night? Bingo.
Okay, but that's
Anyway.
not on our agenda, so let's not get into
Yeah,
that.
right, yeah.
I love when Ray does that.
You don't
That's a
wanna hear
good
it.
tool. No, I don't not want to hear it.
You
I
don't
just,
wanna hear
I don't
But
think it's.
I'm saying,
Yeah.
first of all, we gotta sit out and pick the area. But I think
Okay, wait,
before
I
we-
want to hold you, can we talk about what you just said for a minute? I think one of the things I'm going to suggest is we have a discussion, one of our items of discussion is terms, the appointing authority, because I think that's part of the bigger picture stuff. That's certainly not anything to do with the guidebook, but it reflects on how and what the HTC does and doesn't. And I get your point. I think what you were saying, John, is that with a longer duration, people get a better feel for what's expected based on what the other members are inputting. However, on the other hand, if there's good rules and regulations, should it make a difference? You should be able to look at the rules and regulations and a useful guidebook that actually, not that this isn't useful in terms of a narrative, but it's not useful as a user manual for a committee member, a commission member, or a designer, an architect, or a homeowner who wants to build on their property. One of the things I feel pretty strongly about is that if you have a general understanding of the words in architecture, residential, dormers, and fascia, and soffit, and frontis, and these things, this book, you should be able to read this book for your area and know what you can design and have it approved. And as a commission member, you should be able to read through it and know what's approvable without exceptions. I want to talk about exceptions in a second. So I think that's one of the goals, is that it be friendly in that regard. Does that make, do you guys jive with that?
Yes.
Is that,
Oh,
Okay.
that makes a lot of sense.
well, it's just important. I want to find our common, okay.
But the
So-
other side of it, if you go to Appendix G, the only rules and regulations are one page, you take this the hell off the bottom. The Historic Districts Commission reserves the right to vary for a good cause, any of the above. That was added. We didn't vote that in there. Somebody that worked on this book, that was working for the HDC, put that in there. Nobody knew it, but it was her idea. It went through. Thank God, I'm telling you. That's, when I saw that, I say, we got the Irish standard going.
No, I don't
Yeah,
have that
you should-
page even in this one.
That's page 181.
I don't
Yeah,
have
it's
it.
So-
1995.
Of course you do.
No,
No,
this
it's
is
not in
a
the
different book.
latest print. It's
The
funny,
latest
because I
print.
ordered what was
This is the
said.
latest book.
Yeah,
I'm
but
just telling you, I ordered what was purported to be the most recent book, and it doesn't have those pages in it. So, I think one thing, John,
I have a 1992 print.
would,
Yeah, it's the 95 one.
This is 95.
can you order for each member of the commission the most recent book? Who doesn't have it?
I think I do have
I
it
think
at
it's
home.
out of print, but we could make binders like,
I would suggest if you could make a work group binder for the three of us, for the
Yeah.
most recent, but then make a binder for, if you're gonna, half the cost of doing that is getting it going, so.
Right.
Maybe make enough for all the commission members. There's a variety of reasons, but if you could do that, it would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Because I think as we're talking to the group, the larger group, it's gonna be beneficial that we're all looking at the same book. If you're sending out information or a packet of information that we might put together, or if you have it, it might be helpful. So thank you, and we can just leave that with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can do that.
John, I think I would like to talk at another meeting about the rules and regulations a little bit more, because I personally, I believe that, I just want to say that I believe there should be a little bit of room, maybe it's not written down here, but I think there's a legal reason it's written down here. Is because, look, human nature is that you don't always stick to the rules. That's just human nature. And if you do that and you have something written as a rule and a regulation and it's violated, that's actually legal ground, any attorneys out there, tell me if I'm wrong, but that's actually would be basis for a legal argument.
Somebody was sitting there.
No, but that would be basis for a legal argument if you don't have a carve-out that says the commission may change its mind based upon whatever determination it makes.
Mitigating circumstances.
Right, and I think what you're saying is that it's too lenient. So I would like to just have a discussion at some point in our process about how we work that out, because you make a really good point. If it's there and people are too liberal with it, they don't follow the rules, including the commission. But if it's not there, then we might have some other problems. So I'm going to make a note that we talk about that at some point.
One quick point. We're not dummies, none of us.
I hope not.
We are very intelligent on this job. I find one thing we ought to look into before we do even the guidebook. At the meetings, go open the meeting, chairman opens the meeting, all right, make the presentation. We've been here long enough, all of us, to know what Nantucket is, more so than a lot of people, even the architects and designers. So they sit down, they make a presentation. Why don't they go around the table first and we make the recommendation, what to change, not change, and then argue about which point they want. They argue about the whole point. Every point on that piece of paper.
The back and forth thing gets out of hand.
That's right. Hey, that's the answer, eats up the time.
Part of that is whose style of chair
Long-term
is
it is.
going on too. Ray
Not
tends
you.
to be a little-
I also don't think that neighbors should speak first either. I think
Yeah.
the commission should speak, and then if they have some comments, they could make comments.
Okay, so
Because
what,
that drives
a back and forth dialogue
I'm gonna bring in the recommendation on Mannequin
during the process.
and try to get it closed out, and then you only got
because we're not just doing
3 areas to worry about
Yeah, no,
in the old area.
Yeah, I agree, and just on Val's point, I think it's important to put it, this is an important part of the discussion because it's not just part of the process, but it's also part of what as due diligence, the Historic Commission book should include. It should have an appendix on what our process is for public hearings. I know there's a public hearing process, and I know it's written, and I know that it's not followed.
I have
Not always, and part of that is because we're not, necessarily sticking to the letter of the rule of what text was written down. Part of it is we're a small community and people know each other and we're having a less formal type of a procedure. But I guess just trying to make 2 points. One, I'm making a note that we should be discussing it further along with the other topics that we should be discussing, so we can try and formulate recommendations on how or if to proceed as a larger group, and how they relate to the book. But I also think it's important that we have a discussion because I think it's topical. It's like I think a lot of the times the meetings can be time. We spend a lot of time sitting in these chairs, and I personally don't have any issue doing it. But I think there are times that we could be more time efficient, and I think the hearing process with neighbors is a good example. And I'm not going to use any examples out near the golf club or the tennis club in Wisconsin, but you can't have hearings go on for an hour and a half.
Well, actually, John McLaughlin, do you remember way back there was a timer and you only got a certain amount of time?
Yeah.
So an application wouldn't go on for hours? I think it was like 15 minutes.
So you got 15 minutes per application. If not, we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Right. But that's putting more pressure on the commission. If you have time is up, you say that's it, and you stick to it. We all say, okay, your time's up. We'll see you next week. They're gonna be so pissed it ain't funny.
No, I know, but
I got three items left to go on. I know. I agree with you. They did have that.
I don't know what the time should be, but it just seems like some get an hour and a half, and then we're scrambling at the end to
Yeah.
try and.
Wait till Tuesday night coming. How much time you gonna spend on that housing?
That's tomorrow.
That's coming.
Well,
Tomorrow, excuse me.
hope not a lot. I mean, that should be pretty straightforward so far as I'm concerned.
But anyway,
So So the other part is, okay, so the hearing process with WRT, with regards to neighbors who can say what, when, following our own policy.
I don't know, I just don't think neighbors should speak first.
And I'm making this a discussion topic for, I mean, you're welcome to say anything you want. I just want to let you know,
Yeah.
this isn't the end of it. We're gonna, these are discussion topics for us to be talking about because they fit into what it is we're doing somehow. I don't know how yet.
Good point, Valerie, yes.
Yeah.
The neighbors shouldn't speak, and they shouldn't make the presentation first.
That's what I mean.
Make our go around.
Us, then
What do you want to discuss? What do you think is okay, what isn't? And that way, you can save a lot of time because
Yeah.
I don't know her name, she gets up there, she drives me nuts.
Well, let's not get into that. But I think,
She does the same thing. She
I-
beats it to death.
I think that there's a lot of potential to institutionalize, using this as an example, the process. We work out, the commission works out what they feel is the fair and right process. Nothing says we have to use what we have. It goes in the appendix, as an appendix, it's followed. It may not be in a printed book yet, but it becomes one of our appendix, and it's followed. And it's a responsibility of each member, and it says right at the top, it is the responsibility of each member to point out if there's a shortcoming in this process as it's occurring. So everyone feels comfortable saying, you know what, Madam Chair, I have a point of order, or Mr. Chairman, I have a point of order. This is not the policy on how we address this. We have a policy, it's appendix, P for public PA. I don't know what it is. So that we can try, because my experience with this type of thing is you institutionalize the human part of it so that it can be replicated and replicated and replicated. They don't want to make it like you have to do this and cross this T and dot this I and then go here, go around there, you have 30 seconds, come back. It's got to be human, but it also needs to be written down because if it isn't, it morphs over time. And if it morphs over time, then one, we're wasting our time sitting here. And two, the desired result over a period of years is never achieved because the people who sat down and thought about the desired result and the people who voted on it don't get that outcome because it changed. People are doing things differently. It's like we're not following the book. It's like the good example, John says, well, roof walk such and such and so, and you're not doing it. Now, I think roof walk's a bad example, personally, and we can talk about roof walks in particular as part of our thing. Roof walks, in the guidebook, the information and the policies that the HTC have followed are inconsistent. It says there was one on every house, right in the guidebook. I'm not arguing the point, I'm just using an example. On the other hand,
Every other house.
it says we have people saying, we have commission members who've experienced the policy being you can't put one on a house unless it's documented as it was there. I'm not saying somebody's right or wrong, I'm just saying those are inconsistent and it provides a really convoluted, confusing message to the public and the designers because they don't know what the hell they're supposed to do. And then it comes down to you come in here and no one on the commission can point to a specific rule or regulation and then we can't be consistent. So anyways, that's one of the things we'll talk about.
Well, but actually you raise a good point. I think part of this could be for new members that are coming on because as many years as I've been appearing in front of them to actually be on the other side of the table, I was kind of like, I don't know what I can say. I don't know when I can say it.
Right.
I don't know how I can say it. Almost like some training for new
Right.
people.
Right, this is how we do what we do. Welcome, well, that's why I always say welcome to people because, I've sat here and I've sat on this side of the table and other things and you're literally your life. I mean, there's a lot of people whose lives are, this is their third multi-million-dollar home, God bless them. But there's a lot of people who come and sit in front of us and this is their hopes and dreams. And they have no idea what the hell is going to happen. And it's very discomforting and disquieting, especially if you don't have any expectation. So I agree with you. If there's something we can do to help, look, we're not a welcoming committee, or we have a role, but at the same time, there are things we can do to help people to understand what's expected of them. I think the policies or the process and hearing procedures that you started is a good one.
Right, we need to.
Yeah, we need,
work
and
on
that's,
that.
yeah, and I think that's another one that should be an appendix.
Right.
Because again, it gives the whole group an opportunity to be able to say, hey, wait a minute,
Right.
this isn't how we decided to do it.
Right.
Reel it back in, put the wheels back on the bus, let's get back to work.
Right.
Okay.
So let me write that one down. John, what did you actually title that document?
What,
Oh,
the document?
No. John had written up something for us,
Oh,
and I
I
don't.
called it exactly the rules,
For-
regulations, processing of applications, and,
Public hearing or something, I thought.
yeah.
Okay, well, I'll put that on our list. I'm just gonna put John H. provided documents as topics of discussion. Because I think part of this process will be that we can drive discussion at the larger group, when it comes to things like the like-kind application, because that's relevant to what we're doing, when it comes to the process that our hearings are conducted with, which John wrote up. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yes.
I'm kind of,
No, well,
This is new to me,
a
too.
a whole new
Yeah.
ballgame, so.
okay, I appreciate your
Yeah.
patience, because I came with no preconceptions on how to handle this. What do you guys think? It's around 2:30 now. We can keep talking about stuff. I think what I'll do is, I would like to take this and try and work up I'll try and work up a format of things that we agree on and lists. So we'll have like a list of action items agreed on, a list of items to discuss, so that we can keep a running tally and we can move things. Open items can be moved into actions, action can be moved into actually tangible acts that we can do. We decide, well, what do we want to do with them? Okay, for example, John, we said we want to tighten up the rules and regulations in the OHD. Okay, so that'll be a list of things to discuss further, because we got to figure out what our recommendation is.
great.
And I think the other thing I might say is, so I'll get that together for the next meeting, and I'll provide it to John maybe to circulate. So, we can circulate stuff, but you can't be communicating about it. It's just better to do it through staff. John, is that okay with you?
Yep.
Okay.
I just thought of one other thing.
Please.
With the changes in the building code, especially with regard to energy, I think we need to have a discussion about that.
I've understood every house now needs to be solar
Ready.
ready. Yeah.
Well, there's that, but which I'm not really quite sure what that is. I asked Lauren and I got lost a little bit.
Do you want the recap?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically what that is, John, you don't have to but listen, because this is something that's new for us.
Yeah,
The state mandates that every new dwelling, and I think it's additions over a certain whatever, has to demonstrate that it's solar ready. And how they do that is they have to, it only applies to certain structures. It has to be within a certain arc on the cardinal points that are solar optimal. So I don't remember what the exact degrees are, but it has to be where the sun is for most of the time during the winter, because it needs to be viable source of solar energy year round. And then they expand it out for summer. So if your structure has a southerly or a west, I think it's southerly and maybe western facing, and it's within a certain degrees, then by the energy code, you have to demonstrate that it's solar ready. How you do that, not for the HTC, but for the building department, is you have to turn in a drawing that shows that you can have a certain minimum amount of square footage on your roof of solar panel. Then you also have to show in your construction documents how you get a conduit from the circuit breaker board to that. Those are the two things. And actually, it doesn't even have to be a conduit. You just have to show that you've, with a line in your drawings, that you've provided a path for the wiring to the panel from the solar installation so that it's considered solar ready. That's it. So,
Whether or not that faces the road,
and then, but so that's a good thing is, so one of the things that we'll need to figure out, and it'll be part of our discussion, is so we can make a recommendation to the commission is how much of this do we have to follow? How much of it is null and void by virtue of the fact that we function under the federal and state law, and we're a federal historic district on the National Register of Historic Places. Those will be things that are going to be on our list, and we're going to have like action items that we're going to have to get information from town council in order to move it along in our own discussion in order to eventually make a recommendation. So the energy code is a great one because that's going to create a bunch of other little things to discuss.
Right.
And that's why I was saying before, we don't have time to rewrite this thing. We got so much to figure out to what goes in it. You know?
And I just got a thing from Mass Save, I think I forwarded it to you one time.
Yeah.
About historic buildings not necessarily being exempt anymore.
Yeah. Yes, and you know what? I put an email out to a code specialist on that. I never heard back from him.
So you know what I'm thinking, windows and stuff like that.
Yeah. So historic exemptions. Okay, so I'll put these on our list, and then we'll kind of prioritize.
It's a tough thing.
I know.
Kind of prioritize. What are some, just for purposes of the list, what are some of the other things? We talked about area plans. We talked about, which is, you know, we understand is not necessarily specific unless we're talking about the three main ones right now. I think it's incumbent upon us to have a discussion about different types of structures. John, what I mean by that is we have workforce housing coming in. I'm not talking about a specific house or a specific one. Just my shoulder hurts. And we as an HDC went through a process that I think we could do better to eliminate in the future by having guidelines for those type of structures. You know what I mean?
Well, it was also,
What type of structure are you speaking about?
Well, the kind of, what's the most recent one that we're working on? I don't want to get into discussion about that, but six fairgrounds. If the HCC had guidelines for multifamily homes,
Right.
and it might be that there's guidelines for duplex, there's guideline for triplex, quadplex, and apartments.
Right.
And it's not they're the only guidelines, but it's just to give so that whoever walks in the door, again, someone gets an RFP from the selectmen, town meeting votes it in, they have some guidance from the HDC without us having to ever be involved directly at the onset, so that they have an understanding of what they can design without coming in here. It's very difficult to tell someone with that type of housing to look at building with
well,
Nantucket.
but that was a style that was created once again without any collaboration or collaborative effort with this commission or this
I agree.
department.
And you know, my suggestion is, we do what Nantucket does. Nantucket went out on their own, and they said, well, how can we help guide building? Well, we're gonna get an article in at town meeting. I'm not saying we get an article at town meeting, no confusion
No,
here.
no, that's
I'm
an
saying-
example.
Its example is that we would come up with these guidelines, so that if someone comes in the door and they say to John, hey, we're putting a bid in for workforce housing, it's 100 units, all under one roof.
All in the Mid-Island area.
Well, that's a whole other topic. But then it's in the guidebook, not necessarily this type of printed guidebook yet, but there's some specific stuff. Maybe it addresses site, hardscaping, parking. Maybe it addresses
Make sure you have enough.
massing and where utilities like AC go and things along those lines.
Trash.
Yeah, just so it's easier for everyone. I mean, we've spent a lot of hours, and those architects spent countless hours on stuff that perhaps if there were guidelines for that specific style, they wouldn't have had to do.
Well, and also then that we need to have some conversation with selectmen too, because they seem to have a great deal of input on that without regard to,
Yes, and I think that comes out on the tail end with respect to our recommendation and how we
Yeah.
implement it. Did that make sense?
yeah.
Okay, so do you guys think that that's a good idea, or you think it's a bad idea?
No, I think it's a good idea.
Look into it, I think we
Okay,
should look into it.
I'm just trying to make sure I'm trying to, it's dark in here, we're trying to open it up and make sure we're all in the same light, you know what I mean? So multifamily. Now, the other one that came to mind, and this is all again from discussion that we've had as a group, is commercial. And I don't want to get weighed down in it because I know there's some real issues and concerns, but the 40-foot thing, I want to just try and guide us looking forward. If we had guidelines on commercial structures, and again, it might be, maybe it's sizes, maybe there's like a bracket, little itty bitty, middle just right, and large and extra large. Some guidelines that might help designers and architects and owners before they come in the door. I'm not saying we're going to work them out right now. This is a list of things for us to talk about. So commercial structures. Maybe it's also like industrial structure. I mean, there's like a lot of avenues that could be taken. Ben came in here and he was like, I don't know what to do with this building. It's a steel building. My client wants this. You guys, I'm not sure what you want. I think that there's some room for us to be working with guidelines for different types of buildings. And then obviously there's going to be the whole other thing is going to be figuring out how to make those mesh. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I
Do you think it's worthwhile to be having that on our list of things to address?
I do.
Should look at everything.
Okay, so.
There are also things that are predicated, again, out of our jurisdiction. Sizes and shapes of lots have significantly changed, and development organization, that in and of itself drives different styles as well.
Yeah, and
So you come into a neighborhood that's, I'll use my Cooper Farm Road, or this area, was typically ranches when I was a kid. And for whatever reason, everybody had their yard in their front. So it's
Oh,
like
right,
a
yeah,
yard,
yeah.
then the lawn house, which is horizontal,
Yeah.
garage attached. And now, because of the way things have changed and they're trying to fit more lots in for housing and stuff like that, now the lots run front to back. And it's very incongruent when you look at it. One side of the street is like this and the other side of the street is like this. And I think some good things have evolved from that.
Right.
But you can't always keep consistent with what's around you either for that reason. That's a mitigating circumstance that, if you said to that person who has the lot that's front to back instead of side to side,
They'll have a
This-
gable forward house
well,
on a
it
street
just
that
would
doesn't have.
make a whole new
so
archetype.
right. So what I have here is, I don't know what we're going to call it, but creating direction, quote unquote, including how, for example, zoning infill
Yep.
changes fabric. I'm not saying it's a good fabric or a bad fabric, but changes fabric of existing areas and neighborhoods. So, for instance, I mean, my take on that is what they're trying to do, which they, as the town, through the master plan, the comprehensive plan, is to reinvest in existing water, sewer, and electrical utilities in these areas where they exist, and taking this kind of 1970s Rhode Island planning pattern, which is these big lots where you have a ranch towards the back or in the middle, and taking that and kind of re-engineering so that you have denser infill, and then the architecture is left to the HDC to some extent. So I think that's kind of the same thing. And what we're trying to figure out is, can it be addressed? how might we recommend to the commission it be addressed? Is that a fair,
Yeah.
because I mean, we gotta.
I don't think that we have any control over that. And
I think we do.
I
I think we can. I think the way we have control over it is by inserting and developing the concept of like Nantucket 2050. Because this isn't something that is going, if we're looking at how we're making decisions in our guide, what decisions need to be made in terms of what can be built where, and our rules and regulations, really what we're doing is we're molding, consistent with the act, what Nantucket will look like in 20 or 30 years. Because right now it's going to look like a mishmash because it's in development. You know, people are either they're demoing and moving a ranch off, or they're building around it. But somewhere along the line, in 20 or 30 years, the whole neighborhood is going to look different because the zoning has changed.
Well, I think we'll be a city, and we'll have traffic lights, and we'll have high rises. And
No, we can't. We're not going to. That's why we're planning.
I feel like that's kind of where we're headed, and I think then people will stop coming here.
But that's why we want to plan for the future. That's why
Right.
we're not just doing a kind of a light edit of this. We're looking at the bigger picture, right?
I'd like to think so. I don't know.
Well, that's what we're going to report to the, I think we're going to report to the commission, is that we're looking at this in a kind of holistic, long-term view. This book was written in '67 or whatever for the future of Nantucket, and we want to be looking at it. Our recommendation is that the commission is looking at it in the same way, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I'm not selling anything. I'm just trying to make sure because I feel pretty strongly about it. I didn't come here and invest, whatever little money I had, but a lot of sweat equity over the last 30 plus years so that, I could live on a piece of sand that's going to sink because there's high rises on it and stoplights. This isn't Manhattan Island, this is Nantucket Island. And I want to protect it. And that's why I'm on the Historic District Commission. And I think that if we can help give people guidance, I think most people here want the same thing.
Okay, so for me,
There's plenty of work out there.
aside from the 3 areas we said are old,
Right,
Nantucket Town and Sconset,
and possibly Nantucket, right.
right. For me, the number 1 priority is that guidance for especially Mid-Island.
Right.
Because this is where everything's getting dumped and everything's mandating to change. And I will just use an example of some structures that came in a week or so, 2 weeks ago, as infill buildings that had no character whatsoever. They weren't houses, they weren't commercial, they were very generic. And I'm afraid of that type of thing happening, because then you have buildings that are totally incongruent from anything else. It's bad enough there's already some going on the edge of town, but it's a whole new archetype. It has to have some sort of direction.
Because if we don't define it, it's going to define
And I think
the area.
condos are scary. Condos remind me of Revere Beach and, the Jersey Shore.
That's called nondescript.
When do we
Right.
have condos come in?
We did a few weeks ago,
Oh,
a
I
week
missed
or so ago.
There's condos right there in Marine Limbo.
Across
Across
the
the street.
street.
Right. Okay, but the general concept is that we again, this is the commission and the community are looking to development, no one is here to arrest development, but we also want to define how it happens so it doesn't define the area we live in without having been planned to some extent. And you're talking, the example you're using is the Mid-Islands. And-
Especially because for me,
Yeah.
well, yeah, it's where I live. It's where I've always lived my whole life. But I feel this area is so significantly impacted at the moment that if there is anything we can do to at all save it, we need to do that. And I'm not talking about making the buildings look more like downtown or something. Make them look keep them residential with this infill, other stuff that's coming in and out. I feel like what's been coming in meets the zoning criteria and negates anything else.
So there's really no, you're feeling like it's, I mean, I think I can relate to it. I think part of it is we're looking at the economic facts, and people come in, and the people who typically will live in what I call mid-island isn't what the real estate broker's definition is, or even the town's definition, which is a much broader space. Mid-island is kind of like this area out, 600 yards in every direction, or 1,000 yards in every direction, or something. Well, that's kind of a pretty big space. But the point is that, if I'm getting you correctly, so this is an exercise in understanding, is that, and I think it's economic in part, is people are coming in and they don't have the money to necessarily, they're trying to maximize their dollar. Bregland Avenue is a great example. You're putting up duplexes, you're putting up a big garage with a tertiary, it's all two-story with a third-story dormer. There's not these kind of, like I went Victorian Cottage. On that lot, it's a large structure. But overall, it meets the zoning, but it's not just a box. I could have come in with a box that instead of had covered porches on 3 sides, had just straight up.
It has some character. I'm
Right.
saying that's what's important to me, not these buildings that look like absolutely nothing else that's ever been built here, except maybe Tristram's Landing. That's what they reminded me of.
So they're too boxy. They're more set up to maximize.
Too, John said it, nondescript.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's what I mean by boxy. Is they're plain. There's no.
The massing is incongruent with anything else except for Tristram's Landing. That's exactly what it reminds me
Okay,
of.
I'm going to drive out there again because my memory of Tristan's is it's more. Okay, well I'll refresh it, but
There's
that's a
a
good.
whole bunch of condos there, buildings all in a row, tacked together.
The row houses, that's
Is that what you're talking
started.
about? Is row house style? Or that's part of what you're talking about?
It's part of what I'm talking about, but I get the same general vibe, which is, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, one big thing that you're always very consistent about, and I think in this particular case that I'm thinking of would help, is if you want it to be a house where someone lives, make it look like a house.
That's right. I agree.
Not, we're gonna pretend we're down on the docks on stilts with
Yeah.
sliding glass doors on every single side.
Right.
I
Okay,
have
so
another comment.
please.
Now, you just mentioned something. You had asked, you made it a statement question. What happened to your recommendation on January 30th to this board?
What was it?
5 different applications, because if you got certain things, you know what to expect. They don't have to explain where it is and what it is.
Thank you, John, I worked
And-
really hard on that.
And the other thing, this is from Steve. Historic District Commission, HVAC, exterior architectural elements. So I'm just saying, I've still got the stuff. I don't throw too much out, but we gotta discuss air conditioning, because a lot of times I see air conditioning somewhere and, and they are part, in the old HTC is where I think hide them, all right? Swimming pools, can't have them in the old HTC, I guess, anymore.
Right.
So, you gotta have them out of town. But why have you got to put bushes around them? Because basically, wherever you are, if you're not out in the street directly in front of that house and can see through the bushes, you go up to Cliff Road today, go around the rotary, and come back almost three-quarters of the way around that rotary, you go down here, as though you're gonna go to the dump along, that hill used to be a Nail Hill, anyway. Coming by that day before yesterday, that's coming by there. God, it's winter, right? All the hedges that we approved to screen it is dead. So the only ones who are gonna see that pool is year-round people. That's another thing. The expense of it, it's just, it's not in the old HCC, then you just look at that place down there, Jose Visco had. He sold it, somebody bought it. and they put in 16 lots, 16 houses. Every single house in there has a swimming pool, and they ain't no more than 40 feet away from each other. You drive through there, like, oh, look at all the swimming pools. You got a pond over there.
Well,
I'm just saying,
people wanna put
the
'em
psychology
at the
of
beach.
looking at all that stuff, over the years that I've seen, and there's a lot of stuff that, there could have been a lot of changes in, even before the guidebook. The first guidebook held it. They held a lot of stuff in there, and it was strict.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, I'm just saying that it's just some thoughts that I've had, and I had one on this house here on page 47.
See if I have
And
the same.
Steve
here.
said something, I forget what it was. It wasn't Victorian, but the middle house, figure 36.
Yeah.
that says Victorian right on it.
I know, I'm not saying that, no. You mentioned something about the description of a house. I forget, I should write these things down, because I'm slipping a little too. But anyway, it had something to do with that, what you said about a house. I can't think of it, so forget about it.
You were lamenting over the design I presented that was a Victorian cottage style, which is actually in the books, a Victorian cottage style, which is a
What was?
less formal version of a Victorian,
What is?
a Victorian cottage style. Victorian hyphen cottage style.
I've never seen a Victorian cottage style house.
Yeah, it's what it is it's
Google it.
It's Google it. It's a simplified Victorian. That's all. It's less ornate. You know, a Victorian is in a way a less ornate Queen Anne, right?
Got it.
And a Victorian cottage is the next step down in terms of ornamentation. That's all.
Go up North Liberty Street and turn into, what's that subdivision, goes over to Main Street?
Woodbury?
Woodbury.
Bruce Poor built it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Woodbury.
Go in there and look at the third house on the right.
And what's
They
that?
talk about a hat,
Right. No, I
Victorian.
got you. I got you.
It's nondescript, you don't know which way it's going.
And
It's a mixture.
I want to mention a couple quick things then along those lines. One, so John, I'm going to add HVA duct list. The application was already on the list of things for us to be reviewing and discussing and coming up with recommendations on. I also added along this line of nondescript the under areas, which would be a focus with the mid-island area, but also a general discussion about characteristics that define Nantucket and how to architecture and how to encourage them and how to ensure they exist, and then also discussion about those things that don't define, that are anti-ethical. Is that the right word? It's ethical. I don't know how to say it.
The antithesis?
Of Nantucket. So we're kind of discouraging that by calling it out specifically. Like flex event windows, the fixed window with a casement underneath is in the book. Don't specifically says these are not part of Nantucket, don't use them. They were used a lot back then.
Yeah, my aunt's house up in on Duke.
They're here.
Yeah.
She's got them.
Could you prioritize that
I'm
and
gonna.
send us copies by email or whatever?
I'm going to try and do that in the next 10 minutes. I will. I'm going to put it together, and we can discuss the format at the next meeting as well as some other topics, and we'll prioritize these at the next meeting.
You
And
want
then-
another meeting?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So I had suggested, I believe we discussed, maybe we didn't, Wednesday at 1 we're scheduled, next Wednesday at 1 to 3. And then Wednesdays generally work on the calendar with the town for this room. And what do you guys think? Are you available? You want to do Wednesdays at 1?
When do you want to plan the next meeting?
We're going to
Wednesday
meet Wednesday at 1 next week.
Okay, fine.
But I need to book the room well in advance, so I want to confirm with you guys Wednesdays at 1 are a good day and a time. Because I want to just set a meeting day and time that we can, plan for. I think it's helpful for everyone. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, because the deadline's at noon, so.
That's what I thought of, is get it out of the way and,
Mhm.
then we can come over here and John isn't he doesn't have it.
Is that a good day, John, for you?
It's up to you guys. We'll make time.
I asked them earlier if they were good with it. and they
Yeah,
said yes.
no, that's
And I
fine.
didn't want to not
That's fine.
be receptive. I
Yeah.
mean, it's important through this whole process that we're getting your input,
Yeah, no, that's,
I think. And part of it is even like the little details about when you're available. Okay,
I'm getting paid by the hour when I'm available.
so looking at our agenda, I guess we're gonna finish up a couple minutes early here. I don't know that, just so you guys are aware, committee of comments is on our agenda, just so if there's anything, you know, you wanna bring up, obviously. And then, we did date a next meeting, and, before we adjourn, John, just to, so what I'm gonna do is I'll get you this list, and, I don't know what I'll put a title on it, and it'll be dated, so that everyone is revised.
Okay.
You know, it'll roll forward,
Okay.
and then, it'll be referenced as a discussion.
Okay.
So that we don't have to list every single thing that we're gonna discuss on the agenda, it will just be a reference point.
Okay. Unless you want to touch on specific things that you have documented.
Good idea, that's a good idea. So, and okay, so that's how we'll deal with that. And then do you guys have any, just programmatically in terms of meeting, anything you need? John, you wanna bring in pizzas or soda pop, or is there something else we should be doing here? I wanna make sure this is a good opportunity for you guys to say what you think of what just happened. Are we on the right track? Are we not on the right track?
I think you have to start somewhere, and I think as the process
track.
evolves, it will shake down into,
More deep,
Right.
a little more granularity.
because it is so comprehensive and it is so huge a task
Okay.
that you're right, it's not going through the book page by page. It's based on our experience, both on this side and the other side of the table over 20 or 30 years, what works, what doesn't work, what's evolving outside around us. It's the lot, so it has to sort of be a little bit chaotic at the beginning, just because everybody wants to make sure all their points are
Yeah.
considered.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I'm gonna try and listen and, you know, my role is gonna be primarily to try and facilitate and then try and guide in terms of, the bigger picture, since, you know, I brought it up and I had this idea, not that it's my idea, but to communicate that I want us to keep focused on this as a 2050, and I'm not married to that concept in terms of what year or anything like that, but that it's the long-term view. So I'm gonna keep trying, everything we do, I'm gonna try and keep under that kind of an umbrella. Unless you guys don't think it's important to do that. I
No,
personally think it is.
I actually do.
Okay. So it sounds like we
I
took the
actually
point.
do agree with you on that.
Oh, well, thank you, I appreciate it. John, this is yours.
Motion to adjourn?
No. wait,
Oh,
no.
okay,
I'll
not
go back.
adjourn.
That picture I said down there on Lion Street, and Pine, Victorian, that one picture?
Yeah.
All right. The house next to it going into Lion Street, that's what I had in my mind. That house ended up into a court trial that you wouldn't believe it we had to go through.
Right.
The barn?
And, all right, the judge made a decision. He says, this is the decision, he said, I'm gonna make this, and this will hold, he said. He said that the only architectural things that we can speak about, he says, was your exterior architectural features, which is a foundation, wall siding, trim, windows, roof, and chimney. Now, we have another section, which is landscaping, which is, he didn't rule on that, he just ruled on that, and now this is a judge's, Superior Court judge's decision. That will hold as law until it is appealed by somebody that doesn't like it.
Then what are we doing here?
That's right, that's what I'm saying. That's the decision. I don't know, I'm gonna try to find that decision. I've got it somewhere.
Comment on massing, building
Huh?
shape. You can comment on massing, building shape, that's in the legislation.
The legislation is pretty
No, the
specific.
judge overruled it. See, you get to take the judge's decision to court to change that with the
All
legislature.
right, so who is an attorney on TV now, huh?
Who's what?
You're an attorney on TV now.
I gotta go pick up somebody.
I understand what you're
Thank
saying.
you very much.
I understand what you're saying. I don't know what to do with it, because if that's the case, then why are we even doing this?
Because it has to be done
Good enough answer for me.
before I pass on.
Oh, Lord.
Is there a motion to
Motion to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Is there a vote?
Yeah, you guys, just before we actually vote, our voting policy is gonna be is if no one says nay, then it passes.
Okay.
It's just gonna be a vote by consent.
Discussions, and the only motion would be to call a meeting and the motion to adjourn it.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer that we don't have a big formal
John,
meeting, so
thank
we
you.
actually make recommendations.
Thank you, sir.
Well, at least we've started.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.